So this is one of the first true video essays I ever made. One of the only videos from my early days where I was doing something other than just cataloging my own taste, where I was actually talking about an important piece of film criticism and film analysis. And I'm glad that this was one of the first videos of mine that went really popular when Francesca Ramsey put it on Upworthy. That's when it really took off, and that's part of the reason why my channel took off. About 5 years ago. I scripted this video in about an hour. In the early days, that's about how long it took me to script my posts. So I just kind of, I don't know, looking back on it, I kind of feel like I'm just presenting bullet points. One of the few things I don't like about this video is that I don't think my examples are incredibly well curated. Like, I gang up on Vince Vaughn right at the beginning, and he's a handsome enough guy. And then Robert Downey Jr., I think I qualify my statement about Robert Downey Jr. a little bit by saying, like, well, Rachel McAdams is hotter, but I mean, like, he's not a schlumpy looking guy. So anyway, and I think that's just a result of putting these together in one weekend, is that my examples aren't incredibly well curated. One of the other things I'm not crazy about is the choice of song. I'm using Led Zeppelin. It's a great song, but Led Zeppelin had, I found out later, a very notorious groupie culture, which is not appropriate, especially for a video about feminism. Right now I'm talking about the femjet picture. That particular criticism is taken straight from the writings of David Mamet. David Mamet has said the same thing, that femjet pictures are women either crying or bravely not crying. He didn't really explain what he meant by it, and so I didn't really explain what I meant. But, well, maybe I'm being too hard on myself. I'm talking right now about women as spectacle, and specifically trauma against women as spectacle, which is I despise it, and it's all over Hollywood. Anyway, I'm glad that I circled back to coming up with actual examples. And what I'm saying here in the video, I'm talking about how shooting, for example, rape scenes to titillate the audience is gross and disgusting and immoral. I had commenters come on this video say, like, well, if you're titillated by rape scenes, then you're the freak, not them. I'm not talking about what I find titillating. I'm talking about what the authors of these films want their audiences to find titillating. So just brief little point. I'm talking about James Cameron here. Again, an effective scripting these things in an hour. I love this video. It's very dear to my heart. But one of the things that I notice in putting it together so quickly is that I'm talking about James Cameron, and I point out this thing about his filmography where people assume it's feminist when it might not necessarily be, but I don't go into it. Like, nowadays, I feel like I could do a whole video dedicated to James Cameron's filmography and discussing what makes it feminist or not feminist, whereas in this little video, I'm just like, I mention it, and I move on. One of the things I've enjoyed about the channel is that the videos have gotten longer, and I've been able to take more time with them, and I feel like I'm able to say not necessarily more substantial things, but things in more substantial ways. Now, a lot of commenters have told me that this is not a sexist trope because they say that overweight men are similarly turned into clowns by Hollywood. And it's true that that trope does pop up a lot, but there are more roles for overweight men to play than there are for overweight women, I think. For every Tommy boy, there's also a Samuel Tarly. There's like the lovable shy guy who's overweight and clumsy around women, but of course he always gets a girlfriend by the end. This particular section of the video, in hindsight, I was using the word fat a lot. I think somewhere I used the phrase fat female. And what I'm doing is I'm echoing the language used by the people who abuse these archetypes, but I wish I had at least like thrown it in quotation marks or something in hindsight. I do like at one point that I amend my statement. I go off script briefly. I say, if she's fat or not gorgeous, let's say, and then I threw up a little caption, not traditionally gorgeous. I'm glad I did that. And then, of course, I went out of my way to find pictures of Rebel Wilson and Melissa McCarthy where they are drop-dead gorgeous as a way to try and show to the audience that this is all nonsense. Now, this final point, I get more pushback about my number one than any other point that I raise in the video, and it's always the same objection. It's these dudes, occasionally women, but it's mostly dudes, who say, the reason men are killed quickly and women are killed slowly over time is because audiences don't sympathize with men as much. And I cannot call bullshit hard enough on that. I feel like I could do a whole video refuting that, about how I think it's a form of toxic masculinity for men to come forward and say, hey, we don't care if men get torn to shreds on camera. It's just another form of gender essentialism, or biological determinism. I think if people are more weirded out by violence against women on screen than by men on screen, that's not something that's biologically innate. I think it is the way that society is conditioned, and nothing biological about it. There's a lot to talk about with the final girl myth too that I didn't quite dive into in this video. I didn't dive in as deep as I maybe could have. There's this duality in the final girl archetype. It can be a form of feminism, that the woman survives. That for a while that was the bold statement that filmmakers made. But then it became a cliche, and then it very quickly became just an excuse to draw out the torture of these women and turn pain experienced by women into a form of entertainment, which is something that there's a way to do it, but there's also a way to not do it. And anyway, I'm just glad I was able to hit so many of these points so quickly in the life of my channel. The one thing I do wish I could hit harder in this video, which I didn't, was talking about how a lot of dudes swarmed the comments and said that these are all tropes against women. Why don't you do a video where men are affected by sexist tropes? But of course, every one of these tropes hurts men. We only have time for one example, but like the hotness gap one. Telling men that they should be able to snag a super hot girlfriend no matter what they look like and no matter how they behave, that's just as damaging to men as it is to women, but just damaging in different ways. And I was happy I was able to at least mention that in a sequel post, which everybody should watch. So thanks for listening to these commentary tracks. I hope you enjoy them. I think I'm still trying to figure out what they're for exactly. I don't know if I'm supposed to be pointing out mistakes or things I change or just add on to the discourse, but anyway, while I try to figure it out, I hope you enjoy. So this is probably one of my more endearing rookie mistakes, is when I show a clip from Cabin in the Woods and I give no indication anywhere in the video what this movie actually is, which a lot of commenters have asked about. Hey, what's that movie? Which in hindsight, I like to think I wouldn't make the same mistake twice.